identify yourself by name, give your title and your institution. And at this time, I'll ask Nicole Abernathy to take the roll to determine if we have a quorum.
Yes, sir. Chair Al Brodell,
Present.
Vice Chair Kevin Anderson,
Here.
Secretary Lori Griffin,
Here.
Grayson Bigger,
Present.
Dr. Jim Carr,
Here.
Dr. Jerry Cash,
Here.
Chad Hooten,
Here.
Andy McNeil,
Here.
Dr. Kyle Miller, Greg Revels, and Dr. Michael Stanton. We do have a quorum. We have 8 of 11 members present.
Wonderful. I will now turn it over to the Finance Committee. Greg, you are muted.
How's that? Can
Much
you hear me
better.
now?
Thank you.
Okay. Finance Committee will begin with information item number 20, and that's the annual higher education financial condition report. And Mr. Fuller will provide the background for this item.
Thank you. Good morning. This first item we have is a report we do annually that describes the financial conditions of the public higher education institutions and the challenges experienced by those institutions in related to their financial aspects. We address in the report addresses productivity-based funding, comparison of faculty salaries to other SREB states, tuition and fees, fund balances, institutional scholarship expenses, and athletic expenditures. On the next few slides are just a few of the charts and graphs that are located in the report. We don't have all of them on the slides. They are available. There were some updates to this report since publication the first time. There were a few formula errors in some of the appendices. So that has been updated and posted to the website with those updates. For the first slide we wanted to talk about is the comparison of faculty salaries to the other states in SREB. This is from 2020. As you can see at the 4-year level, Arkansas is still the lowest of any of the states in the SREB. And we are around $14,000 less than the average of the SREB states. Next slide should be the 2-year colleges on faculty salaries. We are above Georgia, but we are still toward the bottom on the 2-year college salaries. Again, almost $11,000 less than the average of faculty salaries in the SREB. The next item, so you can see it still shows from 2013 to 2018. The data from this comes from IPEDS and SREB, and this has not been updated since that time. So this is the similar chart that you saw last year. I believe due to the pandemic, it's been a little more delayed in them receiving their data to update their information. But this is a change in total university revenue from the 5-year period between 12-13 and 17-18. That we do have about a 7% change in total revenue for the 4 years. And then for the 2-year institutions, we are second in the amount of change of revenue over that 5-year period in SREB, with a little over 35% change in total revenue. On the next slide, we'll talk about tuition and fees. We have done a very good job in the state as best we can of keeping tuition increases down. That is helped by the implementation of around $23 million of new state funding due to the implementation of the productivity funding model. But again, even with that additional funding, there has been a need to increase tuition slightly for students. From 2021 to 22, 4-year institutions averaged a 1.5% increase in that tuition, while 2-year institutions averaged a 0.7% increase in tuition and fees. And here's the next slide is a chart of the increases for the four-year institutions. You can see the 1.5% increase for four-year there, and for the five-year average increase of 2.5% per year over the 5 years from 2017 to 2022. The next slide should be the 2-year, same information, again, the 0.7% one-year increase with an average 5-year increase of 2.2%. The next portion of information will be around fund balances that each institution carries from year to year. For any industry standards, optimal fund balances should be between 5% to 14% of the educational and general operating budget. For fiscal 21, all but one of the four-year institutions' fund balances were above this 5% level. And for the same year, there were no two-year institutions who had a fund balance less than 5% of that budget. You can see on the slide, there's the one institution that was below, kind of stands out, obviously. We are working with the institution to help correct get them back on track. I guess we could say on getting those balances back onto the positive side. And then the 2-year on the next slide should show the fund balances each of those have. The next item is the institutional scholarships. This is presented in a report every year that each institution awards scholarships to students. There are limitations in code that no school can award more than 20% of tuition and fee revenue for institutional scholarships. And in 2021, 17,082 scholarships were awarded at four-year institutions. The cost of $75 million compared to 18,000 scholarships the prior year at a cost of $74.7 million. As you can see, scholarships did increase as a percentage of tuition fees to 9.9% compared to 9.4% in the prior year. And the next chart should show that change. And then I believe the next item should be about capital funding. And we have no state dedicated funds to capital improvements for renovations, maintenance, new buildings, while the facility audit program estimates the value for facilities at $5.5 billion. The maintenance needs of institutions for the prior year are $2.95 billion in deferred maintenance costs, with $260 million of that classified as critical maintenance. And we still don't have a dedicated stream statewide to be able to help support those maintenance costs. We are working to try to find some way to help institutions with that. Our recommendations for the upcoming year is to continue to work with institutions to monitor and refine the productivity funding model policies. We are working with the productivity group monthly to see if there's any changes that need to be made with that, and to continue to work with our board, you guys, our board, our staff, and institutions to work with the legislature toward aligning funding policies, state financial aid policies, and tuition policies in a way that prioritize affordability in higher ed. That is the financial conditions report. I'm open for any questions you may have.
Nick, Jerry Cash.
Yes, sir.
Question, are the accounts receivable included with a fund balance?
I believe the fund balance is the cash on hand at the end of the year. It does not include receivables. I'm not.
So accounts receivable are not in the fund balance?
Give me 1 second. Let me pull up the collection of what we have for you. I apologize. 1 second here. I'm sorry.
I know in the accounts receivable, there's a lot of uncollectibles in that.
Sure. Let me get one pulled up here for you. Let's see here. I apologize for not having the information for you quick.
Oh, that's okay. I was just
Yes.
thinking that. It's not going to make any difference anyway, so don't worry about it.
Okay. Yes, it does look like it includes that information.
So all accounts receivable are included in the fund balance of the 5 to 14%.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay.
And they should, Nick, they should have just the good accounts receivable there. They shouldn't keep the bad
Yes,
ones there.
if there's, any accounting for bad debt or uncollectible receivables, that should be accounted for in a separate line. It's not included in the traditional receipt.
That doesn't mean they're doing it, but they should be doing that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Nick.
Yes, sir.
Hey, I got a question for you, Nick. Anybody else have any other questions on this?
It's about athletics.
Well, what I was really wanting to know, I was wanting to know who writes the narrative on this. Do you do that?
Yes, sir.
You didn't want to say that. What I was looking at was some of this auxiliary expenses, and
Yeah.
while I think and I was reading the narrative on there and said, it talks about it not being the cash cows as commonly believed, which I would assume refers to the fact that we have talked about prior that they're using some of the other auxiliary funds to supplement their athletic deficits. And while I would think that they may, I don't know how much they do, but I do know that when you look at some of these, there are substantial incomes made in other areas, such as cafeteria, or it's substantial to me.
Yes.
When you look at what they're pulling out, and which in my opinion increases the cost of going to college for a student. So again, talking about athletics for a minute, just let's try to keep those as reasonable as we can. I understand it's an important part of the college experience, and that students love it and appreciate it, and so do I. But we need to make sure we keep the cost of going to school as affordable as possible.
Yes, sir.
And if there's no other questions, Nick, if you would just go on to item number 21.
Item 21 is the maintenance report. It was requested in a prior coordinating board meeting that we report every year the amount that's transferred to plant funds for any of the economic feasibilities that you guys have reviewed throughout the years that come to before the board. And we normally present this at the October board meeting, and collecting the information with everything going on with the pandemic, we had to push it to this meeting in January. This ensures that all the newly constructed or purchased facilities will have a source of funding for maintenance. And again, this in any institution that comes before the board with a loan or bond feasibility request has to set this aside. And so this is just a report of the transfers that have been made on any of the projects that have been approved so far. And the report should be included in your agenda book. Are there any questions?
Nick, refresh my memory. When did we set the rate, or has that rate ever been changed?
That rate has been set for quite a few years now, but it is still in line with what the rate should be. I think we went back about a year ago and looked to see if there was a need to increase it, because it had been around that same rate for so long. But it is still comparable to what the rates are in the public and private sector.
It may be something we want to take a look at again with the cost of inflation, generally speaking, and specifically to construction and material cost, and that's going to bleed over into maintenance cost.
Yes, sir.
It may be something we want to take a serious look at. That may not be an adequate number for the long or even the intermediate term. So I'm not proposing we change it at this point, but it's sure something we probably need to start looking seriously at.
We can take a look at that and bring information back to you at the April meeting.
Okay, sounds good.
Nick, this is
Any
Al. I had a question as well.
Yes, sir.
I believe in recent history, we've gone back and looked at the definition of what is and is not included in maintenance,
Yes, sir.
as it did not apply to larger plant ops and facilities types issues, boilers, HVAC, that kind of stuff. I know at one point we went back and looked at that. I don't know that we ever did anything with that. Was that just something that was put back on the institution to maintain out of separate funds or capital funds, or did we ever do anything to adjust the definition of maintenance?
That was the only thing we did, was kind of explain what the definition of that planned maintenance was. We didn't make any changes to the current policy.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Al, are you suggesting we make a change to that policy?
With recent history, I'm not sure that policy, or if that's a clearly and separately identifiable issue. I just know that in recent history, we've had at least one institution that struggled with that in particular. And as our institutions and their facilities continue to age, I know in my personal experience that when you're dealing with boilers, cooling towers, HVAC that is starting to age out, just like Mr. Anderson said, the cost of everything is skyrocketing. Maintenance on everything is skyrocketing. And when you're setting that aside, in my mind, when we're putting the term maintenance on there, it applied to all plant ops. And I believe we define that more as sheetrock, paint, and flooring. And so I do believe that that is something that might need to be examined, or at least question those institutions who have faced those in the past as to, do they have a separate fund, or does that just come out of the general fund? And do we have anything set aside for that, or plan for that? Even identifiable list of what equipment will be reaching end of life and anticipated cost for those institutions. Because it can become very expensive, very quick, and can hinder an institution's ability to carry on.
And I will add that the policy that requires them to set aside that funding for maintenance wasn't implemented until 2010. So it's been for any buildings built since then. So as you know, most of the buildings on our campuses are older than 2010. So that's where we run into that issue where there's not enough funding set aside for the maintenance of those older buildings, and we have no state funding set aside for it.
So yes, Greg, I appreciate that, Nick, and I agree with that. I guess I am suggesting that I don't know the proper process to do that, but that has been a concern. We have seen it come to fruition in institutions in the state, and I'm not an expert on how to best prepare for that, but I know that if we're not preparing for that, it will get us again.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Nick, would you please look into that and come back to us with some suggestions on what we might want to do, and or we can talk about it maybe at a workshop or something like that, where we can really get down and talk about it and look at what we need to do as far as requiring institutions to put money back for those things.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Chairman Rebels, this is Jim Carr. Can I just back up the previous item just a minute and ask a question for Nick to speculate on? I'm looking back to the faculty salaries for public four-year universities. And we're at the bottom of that list. It would be interesting to know, Nick, and you may be able to speculate on this. What would that chart look like if you said average tuition and fees charged to students? Yeah, I look at the top. I can't imagine that Delaware is going to charge less than Arkansas and Virginia, Maryland. I'm looking at, I don't guess there'd be a direct correlation, but I bet many of those states are charging far more for tuition and fees than Arkansas is.
Yes, sir. I don't doubt we are, or still one of the most affordable in relation to tuition and fees.
Yeah.
So I don't know that it is a direct correlation, but it could be assumed that. Yes, sir.
Interesting. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Yes, this is Al again. I apologize. Now that we've backed up onto the previous slide, I did not get to ask my question on the informational item number 20 because I was muted. In relation to what Mr. Revel said about athletics, Nick, I ask you every year, and every year I forget, what is that percentage that is allowed to be pulled from E&G into athletics? I have in my head around 2.5%, or some equivalent. Can you clarify that for me?
Yes, sir. It is 2% of the educational and general revenues of an institution, or an amount set by ADHE, which is it increases by the CPI index each year. Give me 1 second. I can tell you what that dollar amount was for the current year. For 21, the ADHE established rate was $1.4 million was the maximum, which was a 1.4% increase over FY20.
So 2% or 1.4 million.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that.
Any other
I was
questions?
prepared for that question.
Anything else? If not, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, Mr. Chairman, back to you.